So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Dana from Ben Nye, and also to Nadine Terens. Nadine is a makeup artist, hairdresser, and special effects makeup artist since 2009. Giving you a lift, aging you 10 years. Currently makeup supervisor on Network 7's Home and Away. Her other credits include Nameless, The Broken Way, Australia, Deadly Women, and Behind Mansion Walls, as well as commercials, fashion, theatre, and bridal. I welcome Nadine and Ben Nye.
All right, so what we're going to do today, we're going to do some very sort of simple effects, smaller effects you can be doing on the fly, you can be doing out of your standby kit, sometimes you're not giving much time to do anything at all. In saying that, we've also already pre-applied a few little prosthetics just to show you how to colour those. They're the Got Flesh prostate stick-on transfers. So we've gotten a little one on his cheek here, one on the forehead and one on the neck. As I said, I've pre-applied them because it takes a little time. So we're just going to colour those in and put lots of blood on it, and it'll look great. So I'm going to start colouring these little guys. I'm going to be using mainly the Ultimate Effects palette, which is great. It comes with a built-in little mixing palette, which is really good. And I'll show you this. I've sort of grabbed my colours out already. I like to work from a big palette just so I can go in and out. Now, anything that you do with special effects, you're looking at brushes, sponges, a whole variety of things, and you're looking at textures. So you want anything that's textured that will give you different effects. You don't want anything to be smooth when it comes to special effects. So I've got a whole little array here of little black stipple sponges, orange stipple sponges, and red ones, as well as a whole bunch of brushes, little liner brushes, I am allowed to use some of the Delium tool brushes, which are amazing. They're made for special effects. They're all textured, and none of the bristles are the same length, so you get a really very little look. So we're going to go in first and just give these cuts a little bit of depth. So I'm going to go in with, I'm going to have to cheat, with the goldenrod yellow. Especially for bigger cuts, you just want to give it a little bit more texture as opposed to just going in with a red and a dark red. It looks fairly flat. So this is actually a trick I learned from Brian Sipe himself a couple of years ago at IMATS, funnily enough. So these colours are cream-based, and you can apply them really lightly. This is it's a hairbrush. Or you can thin these colours down with alcohol as well if you wanted a more translucent look, which I will be doing for any bruising a bit later on. But for now, for these ones, I really want to give them a bit of a heavier coverage. And it also helps to add like that feeling of flesh, like the fat layer you have under your skin can look a bit yellow. So that just helps giving it a bit of dimension and a bit of depth. Otherwise it all blends, especially once the blood goes over, it'll just look black on camera. So you want to give it a little bit of colour in there. And I'm just going to colour all three of them in the same stages just so we can speed it up a little bit. Right, as you can see, I've gone in really quite roughly with that because we are going to build on that. It's just to create a bit of a base layer. And I'm going to go in with just a nice fire red from the effects palette, just to give it a really ouchy look. And I'm just using a really fine sable brush, and I'm just really quite roughly going in and just sort of stippling it on with a brush as opposed to a sponge. It gives you a little bit more control. And you've got to make sure you come up your edges of the actual cut with a bit of red, because that's where the blood would sort of settle to the surface at the most. So it adds depth already because it is obviously a darker colour than the yellow. And then I'm going to go in with a darker colour, something that's a bit more brown based, just to add depth to that. So even though they're already transfers and they already have a 3D effect, just going in with different colours, it'll just make it look even deeper, like it is going into his skin, and we'll just sell it on camera even more. Dark crimson, I believe. Yes. And I like mixing these as well. There's very rarely that I'll go in just with the one colour. I usually dip and dab, and I do like to normally put the effects on first and then just put the base around it, because if you have someone who's distressed, who's had an accident or whatever, your actor has supposedly gone through, you don't want them looking perfect either. So you do want them looking a little bit rough. There can be a bit of redness coming through from their cheeks or whatever. So I like to put the effects on and then just to see what they need, if they need anything at all. Maybe sometimes I just put a bit of a powder on. It really depends on the actor's skin. But we just wanted to show you as well how we throw actors on screen looking nice and, even. So I'm just going in here with the dark still, and I've just gone nicely around the edges here, which will help it again stick out and make these sort of walls look a little bit deeper than they actually are. And this is not a science. You don't have to go and colour inside the lines. This can be a little bit rough. So as you can see, that's already sort of adding depth there. And then with anything anyone would ever hurt themselves knows that anything like that would draw all the blood to the surface. You always have redness around everything that will bleed or has bled. So normally what I like to do, there's two ways you can do this. You can go in with a black stipple sponge, a coarse one or the fine one, and a nice, like a blood red colour, and stipple it all over to just give that capillary effect. Or what you can do, you can use an old toothbrush or a wig brush or one of these little ones, and just thin your cream right down with a bit of alcohol, and you can just brush it on like that. So I'm going to show you all the different ones on different wounds. So we'll start with the stipple sponge. And I've got alcohol here, and I'm just going to spray a little bit on my palette, just so I can dip in it and just thin it a little bit. And I'm going to go in with the blood red this time, not the fire red, so it's a little bit deeper. And before I usually go on with any stipple sponge like that, I always test it on my arm just to see what kind of effect I'm going to get, and just to take the excess off as well, so I don't put a big blob on that maybe I can't take back off, which is no good. So just get it really off so it's a very fine leftover on the sponge, and just go all over, and just go over the edges onto the skin. It'll help you blend the edges as well of the actual transfer. And then I'll mix a little bit of the dried blood red already into that. And depending on what your wound is supposed to be, if it's anything with a fire blast or anything like that, you can put a bit of black in there to just give it that charcoal sort of look, or it depends on, obviously what the script says in terms of what you're going to be doing to your wound. You can also, if you want a bit more of an inflamed sort of looking, see, that gives you much more of a heavier coverage.
So she's breaking up the edges so that there's a seamless transition from the prosthetic out to the skin.
I know people laugh at me for doing this, but it actually really works. So you just crumple it and just spray it with a bit of alcohol. Not too wet, just damp. Give it a nice crumpled sort of texture. And just go over it. So that'll eat into it a little bit and diffuse it a bit more, but it'll eat into it like quite unevenly, which makes it a bit more realistic looking. I'm just going to grab a little bit more of the fresh cut, and I'm going to thin it right down with a lot of alcohol so that I can put it on my little brush and spray it with my thumb. And I'm just using a regular spatula to mix it. To be able to do this technique, it needs to be quite runny. So I've just mixed that to a fairly runny consistency there. And then I'm just dipping my brush, toothbrush, whatever you're going to use into it, and give it a try on yourself. This is very, very subtle. So this you'll have to do a lot of, and you can layer all different colors with this. I'm not actually sure if you can actually pick that up. Probably not. Fair enough. I'll go in with the stipple sponge. So I'm just going to go back in with the dried blood, which is a much browner tone. And then you can always blend that with a cotton tip or just a clean hairbrush, an eyeshadow brush, just to break it up a bit. And what I will actually do is I'll go in with a little bit of just black. So I'm just going in without the alcohol, so just straight. I'm just going on the inside of that wall. So that'll give it a really good outline once the thick blood goes in and the runny blood goes in, just so it doesn't all blur into one. So I think we can add our blood now. I won't add the actual liquid blood until the very end, just because it'll sort of mess up what else I want to do. So I'm just going to add. So the Ben Nye thick bloods come in two different colours. The thick blood, which is the equivalent in colour of the stage blood, which is a fresh blood, so a very red blue-based blood. And then you've got the fresh scab, which is equivalent of the dark blood. So it's a much browner, older looking kind of blood. So we're just going to pretend that this is a fresher wound, and we're going to put the fresh one on there and the old ones on the other two. So this is a thick blood, the fresher colour, and I'm just applying it with a little flat hairbrush, and again, quite roughly, not too precise, and just stipple it all over. And this is, even though it's thick, it's still translucent, so you can still see all the depth and colouring underneath. And make sure you take it over the edges of the actual cut. And then I'm just going in with a clean brush, just to mess it a little bit. And then again, so you can then, if you don't think it's deep enough, you can go back in with colour. It's all about layering and getting it the way you like it. I'm going to do the other one with the fresh scab instead. All right, so now for a bigger cut like that, what I would do, I have a little sculpting tool, like a silicone tipped sculpting tool. And I would try and get it right under the edge, the thickest.
In the Ben Nye line, this is the silicone tool, or ST1.
So as you can see, I've just gone around the edges and done it quite thickly, just pulling it up towards the edge as I went along. Quite heavy in the corners because that's where the blood would pool. So we're going to put the blood on at the very end, the runny blood, just so it doesn't get into our way for now. So I think we'll leave those to sit there for a little bit, and then we're going to move on to something else. Also, I was going to mention, Dana did mention that we put a base on him, and I haven't powdered it because I'm going to go over the top with more cream, so I haven't powdered it so it all blends and sits nicely. That's why he's looking a little bit shiny. We'll powder it all at the very end just so that we can set everything into each other. All right, so we've got the Pro colours here. I'm going to paint them on with a brush. I'm not going to airbrush them. They've got just the nice thickness that you can do a little cut on the lip and it looks slightly scabby without being too cakey, which is great, which is what I love about. I love colours and products that you can use different ways. So this is obviously can go through your air gun, or you can just use it and paint it. So I'm going to go in with the blood red first. Make sure you shake them really well because they settle. And you only need a tiny drop of it. They go such a long way, especially for what we're going to be doing. All right, so I've just decanted a little bit on my palette. So I've got the blood red, I've got the dried blood, and a little bit of black in case I need it. And I've got a very fine round table 0, very fine little eyeliner brush. So I'm going to go in first with your lightest colour. It's always best to start with your lightest colour and build and put your darkest colour on last. And so the best thing is to do is always just work with whatever you've got. So if you can see, everyone has already little creases in their lips, and the best thing to do is just work with one of those. Always work with the lay of the land. So I'm just going to go in there and just a tiny little effect, and sometimes that's all you need to tell that someone just had a punch to the face and, you know, they've already wiped the blood off and they walk on, you know, in the next scene and you go, oh, you know, he's had a punch up. So I've just gone in with the blood red there and I made that a little bit wider. Now I'm going in with the dried blood. I'm going to go over that but not as wide, so I'm coming in narrow and narrow as I go darker. And I'm just literally just going to dab the tip of my brush into a tiny bit of black. If you're a bit scared to go in with the black on its own, you can always mix it in with the dried blood and layer and see how you go. I'm just going to go in straight, and I'm just going to put it right at the bottom there. With this, you want to make sure that you roll your brush on the palette so it's got a nice point. Cool. So we're going to go and do a little bruise now for you. So we're going to start with a bit of redness again. Now what I like to do is I like to use the capillary red, which is a very pink-based red, and just with like a trashed brush that I just rub on my towel. So I'm just brushing that on into the corner here and on the eyelid, going into just his eyebrow there, and a little bit of top of the eyebrow, and just under the lash line on both corners. And just bring it into that little V that naturally occurs on the eye already. And then I'm just going to use a clean brush and just blend that right down to almost nothing. And that's just going to be my base. Now this is from the FX palette that I'm using for the bruise. So make sure you blend it right under the lash line and into that corner there. So now I'm going to switch to one of my stipple sponges. And I need my alcohol again. So with the alcohol, you've got to be careful to see how the actor reacts to it. Some people cannot even have the alcohol near their eye whatsoever, and that's why the creams are great, because you can just use them on their own and just blend them right down, and you don't need any alcohol at all. So I'm just going to mix the fire red again with a little bit of alcohol. And I'm going to go into the edge of my prosthetic as well, again, to blend it even more. And any of the redness in the bruise will always be the one that's the widest spread. And as you go darker, you go in smaller. Go right under the lash line. And into the corner. Then we have a color that's called Bruise, which is great. Now you have to be careful not to layer too many of the purples or too many of the reds all together, because it'll look very flat. So you want an even amount of purple, blue-based colors and red-based colors. So the Bruise color is actually quite purple, so you just want a little bit of that, and I'm just using my little trashed eyeshadow brush there. Make sure you flatten it on your palette as you go, just to give it a really nice texture. Close your eyes for me. And you're going to go on the higher impact points. So if you imagine someone punched, you can even, when I first started out, I used to do this, and go, all right, well, this guy's right-handed, and how would it land? And you kind of measure your fist onto someone and go, well, you would hit there, you would hit here, that's where your knuckles would hit the eye. And that's okay to do that as long as you warn your actor that that's what you're going to do. And I'm just going to go in with a bit of purple there. Look up for me. And I'm leaving this patch here quite light as a bit of a highlight for it. It will look like there was a bit of swelling going on without it being a prosthetic. I'm blending into my edge again from my transfer. So what we're going to do now, so we're going to pretend this is a couple of days old. So as you first have a bruise, there'll be lots of reds and browns, and then as it kind of ages, it goes into purples and blues and blacks, and then it turns into greens and yellows and just sort of fades out. You also have to keep in mind your actor's complexion. So if you have someone who's pink-based, like Chris here, you would go into reds and purples and blues. If you have someone who's got a yellow undertone or is of darker skin, there would be more browns and go into greens and yellows much quicker. They wouldn't be so blue. So we're just going to go in with I'm going to have to cheat again. With the sapphire blue, which is a straight, quite vibrant blue, so you want to be quite careful with that. And I'm going to spray it down with a little bit of alcohol on a red stipple sponge. And the darker the colour, you will only just go onto the high impact points. You won't go all over. And go along the lash line a little bit. And then we have a wonderful colour called Black and Blue, which is black and blue. And it's great just to add that depth to the really, really high impact points. And I'm going to use one of the Delium Tools brushes, which is a really highly textured, long bristle synthetic brush. Back with my brush just to blend that. But I blend it by just sort of stippling on top of it, as opposed to blending it out like you would an eyeshadow, because it'll be too even looking. And then with the black and blue, and the same brush I was just using, look up high for me. I'm going to go right under the lash line, just on the outer corner. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with another orange stipple sponge and a little bit of the green colour, which is called sallow green, and alcohol. And just blend it out around the edges a little bit where it already would have faded a little bit. And then what I'll do is I'll go in with a bit of a yellow, just around the very edges, and spray it right down with a bit of alcohol as well, because you want this to be really translucent. You don't want it to look like it sits on top, rather that it's inside the skin. Close, keep closed. And we're just going around the edges, very lightly. Right, and then you can always go back in and darken it. It depends on the lighting that they're going to be using on set as well. Sometimes you might be doing something that looks great in the makeup trailer, and you walk on set and you go, I can't even see that. And then you go back in and darken it. That's why these palettes are great to have in your standby kit. It has a mixing palette already on top, so you're ready to go, and you don't need anything other than maybe 2 or 3 sponges and a brush and your palette, and you're good to go. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add some blood, and then we're going to add some dirt at the very end as well, so just make him look like he's really just had a big battle and fought his way out of some bad situation. Before we do that, we will, however, powder the bruise. So I'm just using the neutral set, which is a colourless powder. It looks white, but it just comes out clear. So that means that it's not going to interact with any of your colours that you've done on your bruise. And you just press it in. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do a little graze, like he's just fallen, gravel or anything. If you just fall on the floor and you get a bit of a graze. So we're going to be using the Pro FX colours for these again, the liquid ones, and a black coarse stipple sponge. So you just want to give it like that's just one swipe. It just gives it a little bit of a graze there. Go a little bit the other way. Add it to the ear. Don't forget the ears. It always kind of looks weird if they're bloody and the ears are white and clean. Just going to grab another stipple sponge and go in with, I need a bit more of that on my palette actually, just a blood red. And then I'm going to use my really fine sable brush, number 0. And just so you just look at what you've done and you find the ones that are already darker and look deeper and you just add to them a little bit. So I've got my dry blood on here. So I have my black on here from earlier. I'm just going to add a little bit of that in with my dried blood on my mixing palette. And just lightly trace the darker ones. Then we're going to be adding a little bit of dried blood to that as well, just to add a bit of shine to it.
The gel bloods give you texture.
They do, and because they're so shiny, it just really makes it look like it's quite fresh. But then if you want to go back in and add a bit more depth, you can do that over the top of the blood again as well. So if I go back in with my liquid colours, with my really dark black and dried blood mix that I did here, I can add a bit more depth to some areas of it. So what you want to do is you want to just go right along the edge of his nostril. Depends on, I suppose, the nose of the actor. But with Chris, you can see a fair bit of just the inner wall of his nose, so you just want to go in there a little bit. And this is all safe to go in the mouth near the nose, so it's not stinging or anything. Is it? No. That's right. And then what I like to do is I would then go back in with my liquid colours again, which I've just dried on my palette, so excuse me, I just have to pour a little bit more. And I'm going to go in with a dark burgundy colour. Just to make it look really crusty, like he's had a nosebleed, maybe a couple of hours before, and he's wiped the blood off, but that's kind of left over from that. And then you can always add a bit more blood as you go along. So what I've done, so these are the little powders, charcoal, ash, and plains dust, which is a very reddy, earthy kind of tone. So what I've done is I already pre-mixed some of that in a little spray bottle. So there's a tiny bit of black, a fair bit of the plains dust, and Liquicet, which is this little liquid here, which you can use instead of water to create a liquid out of any of the powders, really. And it makes it long-lasting and it makes it set as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my little crumple tissue ready. Very cheap tool. And I'm just going to very lightly dust that over you. Just close your eyes for me. And I just want him to look grimy with this. So this spray is going to give me that grimy look, like he's been out and about for a bit. And we're going to add some more dirt just in the powder form to add effect. So that just gives him a really grimy sort of look. If you find it's a little bit too splotchy at some point, just dab it as you go along. So I'm just going to decant a little bit of this into a pot. I'm going to mix the plains dust again with the charcoal powder. And I'm just going to go over that really roughly like that, turning my brush as I go and relax. And so what you're doing is you're creating these lines, I'm not sure if you can see that are there from him squinting. So you're just creating that sort of, I don't know, it just helps sell the character that he's obviously not liking what's happening. And go on the ears as well, because people do touch and they wipe and it'll go on the ears and all that sort of stuff as well. All right, we're going to put a little bit in the hair as well. We're going to just use any big domed powder brush. Thank you. And you can even just stick a bit of hair down. It'll help you sell that grimy look. At the very end, we're going to spray some sweat spray on that I've pre-mixed with just water and glycerin. Or you can use rose water or whatever if you want to make it smell pretty. And because Chris has got quite dark hair, it's actually quite handy to have the ash powder, which is a lighter powder. So we're just going to add some of the blood at the very end now. I'm going to use the dark blood, which is the darker, browner, older blood, just because I want to sell his character like he's come out of battle. It's been a little while, and he's walked back into safety, or whatever you want to imagine. So I've just poured a little bit into a cup there. You can either apply it again with a spatula, with a silicone tip, tool, or a cotton tip, or whatever you like. I'm going to use a cotton tip for the big one here. So just sit up straight for me. And what you want to do is you want to apply the blood and just let it run where it wants to run naturally. So I'm literally just filling it and literally refilling it. And so everybody wants to run out of there, so I'm just going to help it a little bit. And maybe I want it to run out of here as well. And then what you can do is you can always give it a bit of a tap with your finger, especially if it's older looking. He would have touched it and gone, oh, what's this? Looked that he was bleeding. I'm just going to add a little bit here. And then can you just pat it on the higher points to make it look a little bit messy. And for this one, actually, I'm going to apply the blood with a brush on this one so I can paint it in. And just let it run off the tip of my brush.
And Nadine's using the dark stage blood.
If you want the blood to run a particular way, you can kind of show it. You just go very lightly into a bit of a different direction and then add more blood on the top. It'll follow that path. So especially if you've got someone lying on the ground already and they're supposedly dead or whatever, you can then create that whichever way you need it to go to look best for camera. You can actually tell the blood where to go. All right, so we're going to dirty his hands up a little bit with my little spray that I've pre-mixed. Spraying it really roughly and just patting it as you go along. You don't want any big blobs on there.
So this is liquid set, water-based sealer mixed with Plains dust and charcoal powder.
And then I'm going back in with my fan brush and just the powder. And I'll just get you to just do that for me. And I'm just going to get it to settle around the creases in the knuckles, between the fingers. Where the dirt would naturally settle anyway. Just show me your nails. If you have time, a very effective way of doing it is going in and going underneath the nails. Chris's nails aren't long enough, unfortunately. If you have someone who's got slightly longer nails, with an eyeliner brush and the mixed concoction, literally paint under the nails, to give you that immediate effect. All right, I'm going to spray some more. And as I spray it on, I'm going to get you to just literally do that, like you were going to wash your hands. All right, like that for me. Yep, and relax. Beautiful. And that just gives it that, like he would have done that himself. Turn over for me. Where you want the dirt around is around the wrist as well. And just bend and go into the creases. Yep. Great. Right, I'm just going to finish off with a bit of sweat spray. And then we are all done. So this is our pre-mixed glycerin, just a tiny bit, maybe a quarter, and just water, or you can use rose water. And just close your eyes for me. And I'm just going to spray it into the hair and just along the temples where he would be sweaty. And around the neck. And again, because you've got the dirt already on there, it'll help for that to sort of settle into the creases as well and make it look really grimy. And what you can do is you can stick some hair to it and it'll just help it look a bit gross, which is what we want. And he can even go in with the blood, like he's moved around, and his necklace has gone really nicely into the blood too, which helps us sell that. So I think that's it there for us.
Nadine, you have done a beautiful job. Let's give her a big round of applause.